Welcome, you guys. Welcome to the Heart of an Underdog show with Javi and Jessica Madrigal, where we talk about how to overcome and adapt your health issues, your biggest health issues, so that you can beat the odds, turn your pain into purpose, and live in victory. Listen, today we have an awesome guest, Paul Silva. He's been through a lot of things, you guys. He has some amazing stories of overcoming huge health adversity. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and remember to share and subscribe to this episode. You could always download all our episodes at heartofanunderdog.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. If you want to catch our show live, you can find us on YouTube, okay? On YouTube at Heart of an Underdog.
Absolutely. And we have other things on that YouTube channel too. So if you do go to our YouTube channel, it is Adapt and Overcome with Javi and Jessica Madrigal. We'll have a link for that up underneath this episode. But you'll find our morning show there too. So
yeah, give the wrong.
No, it's okay. We're switching.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's fine. But actually, no, it's fine. We'll have our morning show there too. Hey, good morning, Monica. Good morning.
Good morning, Monica.
Happy Saturday. You wanted to have you had a shout out this morning though. You wanted to address before we move on.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I didn't want to let any time go by. I want to really make sure that we give recognition of today. 20 years ago today, obviously it was 9/11, and I just want to say that myself, we're always praying for those that lost so much on that day. It was a very very pivotal time in my life. When that all occurred. And I know that it was obviously in many of our lives around the country, how important and how actually for those that are very close to the matter, very hard. But I think it's important that we all remember and acknowledge today. Today is a day of remembrance, but it's also it's really a day of celebration in a different way. Okay. If you are a believer, in Christ, and just know that those that gave so much and those that are lost so much, that they're in a better place. And, like I said, it was a very pivotal time in my life and many others. That day, there were so many heroes that were just they were awakened, but that at the same time so many heroes were lost. But also there were so many heroes that since then have been born, that they recognized that there was more to life just than themselves, that there was bigger issues that needed to be stood up for, and they fought for those things and gave the ultimate sacrifice. So we pray for you, we acknowledge you, and I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. Well, we don't want to pass over this because it's passed over too much. So I think it was really important to bring it up, and the thing is you're absolutely right. It's all about the perspective. So we want to keep that perspective today of, number one, that Christ is in control, that we are ultimately all headed to a better place. And that these are things that are going to happen. And we just need to make sure we are learning from that, and we are praying for each other and banding together. Okay.
Exactly.
And we want unity, right?
Exactly.
So listen, one of the things I wanted to make sure we let you guys know about before we bring on our guest today. So make sure you're still staying tuned for that because he's amazing. But if you want to be a sponsor of our podcast, of our morning show, of this outreach that we have of helping people maintain and achieve lifelong health, then make sure you jump over to our javiandjessicamadrigal.com website and you choose any sponsorship level that works for you. You guys can sponsor this podcast for as little as $5 a month. We appreciate each and every one of you that are sponsoring us. Your financial partnership is what helps us get this content out, helps us get these inspiring stories out to those who desperately need hope. They need help. They need direction. And that's what we're here to do. So make sure that you sponsor us if that's something that's on your heart. We greatly appreciate your partnership. All right. So I'm going to introduce our guest. You guys, check this out. Having survived multiple terminal diagnoses and multiple transplants, Paul Silva has learned the key role faith plays in healing. He now teaches this on a full-time basis. He would say that he's been blessed by having survived multiple near-death experiences, and that he's been further blessed by learning how to spot God's hand in his life experiences. Upon retiring from his career in finance, he discovered that there is something more important than helping people with their money issues. It is more eternal than that. That's what led him to create the 3 Steps to Wholeness adult discipleship course. Welcome, Paul Silva, to our show. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
How you doing? Good to see you.
How are you doing today?
You.
Oh, I'm great. Got a nice sunny day out here, and I'm feeling pretty good. So got to be thankful.
That's
awesome.
right.
I love it. Hey, now tell everybody where you're located and where that sunny day is, and a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself so they get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Well, I'm in upstate New York. I'm about halfway between New York City and Montreal, which puts me in a kind of a resort area. I don't live in a resort, but I have a more modest lifestyle than that. But I'm guessing some of your audience might be familiar with either Lake George or Saratoga, where they have horse racing.
Oh, awesome.
Okay.
I'm right in between those two. So
that's great. That's great.
Perfect. So when we first spoke to you, I mean, you had more than we're probably going to be able to fit in 1 hour. I know that because we didn't even get into it. We were like, hold on, wait a minute. So what do we really want to go over? But I do want to jump into kind of, you talked about you have multiple transplants, you have multiple terminal diagnoses. Can you take us back all the way before any of that was going on and sort of what your life was like? And then kind of when did you start going through these things and really what led to your first round with medical adversity?
Okay. Well, what led to it as my spiritual history goes, I spent about 25 years being a devoted atheist, which surprises the people who know where I am now.
Yeah.
But during that period of time, I lived a debauched lifestyle that included everything that you shouldn't do. All right. And one of the outcomes of that, as you reap and sow, was I contracted a blood virus that basically ate my liver. So my first major exposure, I'd been healthy my whole life right up until then, was getting a liver transplant. And that was quite an experience because we're talking like 25 years ago when that was a lot more of an experimental process than it is today.
Wow.
And then things went okay for a while. Then a couple other things happened, a couple of heart attacks. I had been on immunosuppressants so long that they wiped out my kidneys. So I had to go on dialysis for like 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then the guy walks up to me at church, a friend of mine, and he says, you know what? You need a kidney. I got 2 of them. Let's just go get this done. So he volunteered as a live donor.
Wow.
For a non-relative, that's pretty rare. And I thought a great example of Christ-like living. So the next big deal was getting a kidney transplant done, which relieved me of having to do dialysis anymore. It's led to a couple other things, but they're being managed as we speak. So I'm thankful for that. In the interim, I also had a couple of bouts of internal cancer.
Wow.
It's not unusual for a person whose liver has been shut down for that liver to become cancerous. And my first exposure to divine intervention is how close it got after 14 months on the waiting list. So I do want to promote organ donation while I'm here have the exposure, because there's a lot more people dying than need to be, considering how many organs go to waste just because people aren't aware of organ donation. But maybe we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So when they opened me up to do the liver transplant, they found that there was cancer there, and it was just under the amount that it would have required them to just close me up and send me home. So they went ahead and did the procedure. Okay.
Wow.
So that was
That's
my first
crazy.
inkling that God's hand was in it, that he did want me to stay here and learn what work he wanted me to do for him. All right.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. I love that. Those are the little things that just don't make sense, but they make even more sense at the same time. It's like that makes so much sense if God was doing it. But at the same time, in medical, it's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. How is it possible? You know, that's it would be that close. And that's exactly why it's possible. We've experienced some of the same types of things. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you started out as 25 years as an atheist, and then you said suddenly one day at church, the guy walked up to you and donated a liver. What took you from being an atheist to being at church at that point? What was the transition there?
Okay. During my atheistic phase, it was partially because I was a student of philosophy. I mean, that's what my degrees are in and all that kind of thing. And I was reading the wrong stuff. And I was full of pride, which we know, source of all sin and all that.
Right.
So I thought it was all about intellect, do it on your own. There is no God who cares for you. But to answer your question, what got me from that place to the beginning of my walk with Christ, all right, was attending conferences where I was exposed to a rational approach. I mean, Christianity is one of the few world religions that says, come, let us reason together. And it kind of had a cumulative effect on me. It was breaking down my barriers. And I finally just got to the point where I said, look, the evidence of there being a God is overwhelming. You just can't deny it if you take the time to look into it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I gave my heart to the Lord and then started this spiritual path that I've been on for 25 years since then.
Oh, I
Wow.
love that, because you're absolutely right. There is a lot of reason. There's things we can't necessarily prove. We weren't there. But there's so much evidence. I think people just don't realize how much evidence there actually is. And you said, I've actually met people that their whole entire life's journey was to disprove the Bible. And in disproving it, they actually proved it more. And now, of course, they're lifelong Christians, but diving into it, they were like, oh my gosh, I thought diving into it, I would be disproving it. But of course, all I did was prove it, because there's so much evidence. And of course, that's God's plan, is to make sure that, we do know by evidence, even though it is by faith, he does provide quite a bit of evidence.
Yeah,
So I love that.
I have so much respect for people like yourself that can put down their own ego, their pride, enough to say, okay, let me at least listen to what's happening.
Right.
And not putting, and I'm sure at first you were adding a lot to that, but after a while, just kind of leaning in a little bit and being open-minded enough to just give God a chance on the truth of what really the truth is. And that there's a possibility that, like you just said, I was reading the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
I was listening to the wrong people. There is that philosophy there is that possibility that, oh, wait a second, I could be wrong all these years of study, by the way.
Yeah.
That all the time I invested was the wrong thing. But I'm willing to put all that down to get to know Christ, to get to know the true living God. And to me, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people out there that are lost in their spiritual selves, really, because that's what the culture breeds.
Yeah.
The culture really breeds that ego, breeds that pride, it breeds self. And it also does then, like you were saying, it leads us down to a road and has us doing things that we would never really have done.
Self-deprecation, just totally and utterly on our own. I've been there before too, totally and utterly, like just going to do this myself. And that just never works out well.
And it leads us towards death, right? Really does. Not only spiritual death, but physical death. And Christ, he's come to help us all in that way. So, I just have so much respect for people like you and people that just are willing to put down what they think they know and open themselves
and
up
that,
to it.
yeah, and that obviously led to a whole bunch of different, epiphanies and discoveries for you, spiritually speaking, and throughout your journey. So when you're talking about that was your first inclination that God was moving and He was with you, let's dive into some more of that, because you kind of gave us an overview of all the things you battled, but I want to dive into those a little bit. So, what was the next thing? Like, if you were talking about, you had your liver transplant, and that was the thing. Okay, God's in this. Where did He take you from there throughout these health challenges?
Well, we each have a pathway that God is leading us through our life on. Okay. And although my pathway had an extended period of time where I was an enemy of His, He still loved me. Mm-hmm. And since I've come to know Him, He's been able to show me all the ways and the things that He did for me, even before the liver transplant. So I don't want to say that was the beginning of it. I had made the transfer into moving from just evidence and rationality to faith before the liver got so bad that it needed to be replaced. Right. So when I was talking about the first thing about it was that was God's way of showing me that not only does He love me, but that He's willing to intervene on my behalf.
Right.
But the way He did it with the liver transplant was by using men, the physicians. Mm-hmm. Okay. But after the transplant, the head of the transplant team came out and spoke with my wife once it was sure that I had survived it. All right. And he told her, textbook, this guy was dead. All right. We didn't do it. We know he had something else in his corner, and he verbally acknowledged the crucial role that faith played in getting me through that. And that's very difficult if you look at it from an empirical point of view.
Yes.
These guys are very highly technically trained. It's really hard for them to admit that there's something else going on.
Yes, I've never heard that.
Absolutely.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone tell me that their doctor came out and said faith definitely played a part in that. That's incredible.
Well, it does. Yeah. You see it among the nursing staff a lot more than you do the surgeons. Because they're seeing a guy he's under anesthesia. They don't know him from Adam kind of thing. But the nurses will frequently recognize the patients that thrive or the patients that have faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it goes really back to what you were talking about when you were an atheist. Not saying that doctors are all atheists. I'm not saying that. But they are literally neck deep every day in the science and the methodology of that, right? Because they're about saving lives, and they have to know and understand the body in their particular speciality. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times they're so absorbed with what they have to do and their own personal skills. Okay. Mm-hmm. I hate to say this because but it's true. There are some people, not just doctors, but they take their skills and they're so good at their skills. Mm-hmm. They feel that they are almost godlike. Yeah. Especially those that are about saving lives. Again, I say this, not just doctors, just lot of other people in general get caught up in so much of ego. They think that it's all about them. But when God walks in that operating room and He goes beyond science, beyond human understanding, mm-hmm. there comes a point in everybody's life that you have to say, wait a second.
Yeah.
That something else happened here. Everything else I saw, textbook. Yeah. He should have been dead. He was dead, but something else happened.
I love that you say beyond science.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I know that is awesome that they acknowledged it. When you say beyond science, that's something I think what we're seeing here is, I say this a lot, God created science. It's not separate from God. He created science. So I don't understand why we always separate it like it's God or science. No, it's under God. He created it. So when He goes beyond that, it's just one of the things He created, right? So there's science for us to be able to study, for us to be able to understand His creation. That's it. Science is the study of understanding God's creation. That's it.
Absolutely.
So when he goes
I'd like to
beyond
give you
that,
an example of
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I love
yes,
that.
absolutely.
Well, and I appreciate what you said, Javi, about if you deny the existence of God, the only person who can be God in your life is yourself, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and it's not limited to people who have highly technical skills. I've met an awful lot of people who seem to have no skills whatsoever, but they still think they're God.
Yes,
Not to be too
exactly.
sarcastic, but
So
but on
true.
the other end of the spectrum, I want to give a little honor to my father. He was a PhD research chemist with 17 patents to his name, but he had faith from the get-go. And he knew what Jessica just said. Science is just discovering God's creation.
Yes.
And he didn't see any contradiction in that at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
So, but to go
I
back
love
to the pathway that you wanted us to explore today, the liver was only a way of him showing that he could intervene on my behalf.
Yeah.
But his intent long term was to show that he is even greater than that. So
Yep.
after the liver transplant, after and the cancer came back, by the way, the one that they took out with the liver.
Oh, okay.
That's the part that he chose to use to display his miraculous healing power as opposed to just the technically enabled healing. All right.
Okay. No, that's
So-
great.
So to go from the intervention to the miraculous, when the cancer came back, it was discovered that I had a mass on my liver by a scan that they do. Okay. And they says, well, the regional hospital says, well, why don't you go back out to Boston where they got more expertise on this? And when I did, and I, in the meantime, had attended a prayer meeting and so forth, had a lot of people praying for me throughout this process, and I thank them all. But when I got back out to Mass General in Boston, they ran the same scan, and the cancer was gone completely. Right?
Wow.
Now, that is God contravening, or I should say, there should be a better word for overriding his own physical laws.
Yes.
Yes.
He made the laws, and if he chooses to use something that is outside those laws instead of the natural, the supernatural,
Yep.
well, everybody hates that word.
Yeah.
Okay, but it is beyond natural
Uh-huh.
for him to do a miracle.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I love that.
That was a miraculous healing that showed me the difference between those two.
I love how you broke this down. I actually haven't really heard anybody break it down that clearly before. Where and how God intervenes and how he intervenes differently, and just how sometimes he just overrides his own natural laws. He's like, this is how I choose to do it here. And sometimes I choose to do it this way. And I love that it's always beautiful and perfect, but that he shows that he's so multifaceted in how he walks with us. So I love that. Absolutely beautiful.
You know, it's amazing when people bring their personal stories like you of evidence of that supernatural, because there was a scan, all right, an actual scan. And now look, my background, I've worked in the healthcare for 25 years, and specifically working on diagnostic equipment, working in that environment. And I know the scans you're speaking of. I've seen these scans. I understand the technological side of those scans and what all goes into it and who reads it. It's not one person. Okay. It's other doctors, it's other specialists. It goes through many different channels, especially when it comes to diagnosing somebody with either cancer or reoccurrence of cancer. And what you're saying is a growth. So I want to make this clear. There was no mistake that it was there. At the same time, it's the reverse. When you were diagnosed with something and they take another scan, it's not just one person looking at it. It's
two
several
different
people,
hospitals.
several people, a team of people looking at these scans and diagnosing. So when you say it was there one moment and then going somewhere else and getting another scan and getting another diagnosis, it's gone. That is truly amazing.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
So I would love to hear more about these. You said you had several transplants. You were like through a couple heart attacks in there. It's funny when you go through so much that like one heart attack will change someone's entire trajectory of their life. And it's like the biggest thing that ever happened to them. And it is. No questioning. We've been through a heart attack. It's a huge thing. But when you've gone through also being through a lot of things, I understand the idea in your head that like, oh, well, some of that was small compared to some of the other stuff. Like, it's like your perspective changes. So I want to talk a little bit about your perspective that you've gained throughout all of these things you've been through. What is some of the, the top couple things that you feel like it's just a huge takeaway that you could share of just being that you've gone through so many things, even if somebody's going through one thing and that's, it's a big thing they're going through. Like, what is the takeaway you would give them?
God is there with you. Be aware of that and open to receive what he has for you. During this period of time, you had mentioned, and I like in the beginning of your show, turning pain into victory. Was that the
turning pain into purpose? Yeah.
Even better, pain into purpose, because the course I teach is all about purpose. All right. So we'll get back to that. All right. But he taught me pain management techniques while my mental faculties were so reduced after the failure of the liver that it was like a mental exercise for me to button my shirt.
Okay.
When all the toxicity that's normally filtered out of your bloodstream by your liver, if the liver shuts down, the next finest oil filter, if you want to call it that, is your brain. So it gets all loaded up with this stuff. All right.
Yeah.
And your acuity goes down as it accumulates. Even when I was in that impaired state, he kind of took me aside and spoke to me and said, look, here's something you can do to make this tolerable. Right? And if you want me to spend a minute, I'll let
go ahead.
It's kind of funny. Okay.
I love it.
Now, he knows each of us so intimately that he knows how to say things to us that we can receive, that we'll understand. Mm-hmm. And he knows everything we've been through, so he can pluck pieces out of it to use. All right. So in my case, I used to, and still do, love blues music. All right. And he knew that I went through the whole rock and roll era of the 60s and 70s and stuff. Right? So when the pain gets nearly intolerable, and they wouldn't give me any pain meds while I was liver impaired, because pain meds are processed in the liver. So you don't have access to the normal relief method. So he sang a little tune to me. All right. There is this tune, and I don't even know who did it. I mean, it's so long ago that I heard it, right? And it goes basically, excuse the singing, right? Roll in my sweet baby's arms, roll in my sweet baby's arms. We're going to lay around the shack till the mail train comes back. Roll in my sweet baby's arms, right?
Oh, you have a great singing voice. Right? That's great.
But the funny part is, what he gave me, again, in my impaired state, was leaning on the everlasting arm.
Wow.
And I had never read in the Bible or heard that in anything, right? But you just take that phrase, put it to that tune, and I could just run that through my head over and over again when the pain was too much.
Oh, wow.
That is beautiful.
That is a beautiful gift.
And I hear that oh my gosh, that just speaks to my heart, because music is my relief anyway, for stress. Music like is in my bones. It's in my blood. It's just, when I hear it, I feel it. I'm inside of it. It's a weird thing. Like, it just does everything for me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all that. So when you're telling me that God speaks to you through music, he does with me too. So that I completely understand how powerful that would be to just have something you can just like commune with. And it's funny now that you immediately said leaning on the everlasting arms, and I know that song. So when you put those two and two together, but he was speaking your language, that song that you knew, and that's so beautiful. What a gift that was.
Yeah.
It was a big encouragement. So now I've totally lost track of my train of thought.
No. There's no track.
Back on the page you want.
There's no track. I just want to know more about your story. I want people to know more about your experience, because look, everybody's experience is so unique and beautiful, especially when we really dive into the moments that aren't just your clinical stuff. Like, that's what I want to know more about that. Like, what else did God do for you throughout that you feel like are the things that you use now to share with people in your teaching, in your coaching, in your course?
Mhm.
What else did God do? I want to know more about that, because those are the things that he's really trying to share, right? Those are the things he does so that those are used in multiple lives. So what are other things that God did throughout that are just super unique like that you could share?
Well, I have a pastor that I've had for quite a number of years, and he has said on a number of occasions that the thing about me is that I've made him waste 5 eulogies because they come to hospital, see what kind of shape I'm in, and go home and write a eulogy, and then the next Sunday I'd show up at church. So
that's great.
The next thing that he gave me is the gift of resilience. Okay. If your listeners are currently struggling with a medical challenge, all right, I would encourage them to look to God for the strength to bounce back from it. Where you are right now is not where you're necessarily going to be in hopefully a short period of time, but even if it takes some time, you can be in a better place even before you're graduated into the real better place.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, keep you, and the other funny thing was combining the first heart attack I had was the day they put me on dialysis. They put me on the machine. The kidneys had totally shut down, so they had to do a catheterization. I'll speak your medical language for you, Ali.
Yeah.
So they did a catheterization, put me on a machine. Before the treatment's even really going good, I'm having a heart attack. So they take me off the machine and do another catheterization to do a stent. And then, and then it's back to dialysis. So I had one long day there. Okay.
That's I was going to say, that's a long day, man.
Yeah.
But to move on from challenges, and they don't have to be medical. I know that's what you guys focus on. Okay. But people face all different kinds of challenges.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you remembered the 9/11. There are people who were emotionally challenged by that who weren't anywhere near the site.
Yes.
And then you got the people who lost somebody in it and they're scarred,
Yes.
So I want to pray for the people to get past that event and to encourage them to discover what God's purpose for their life is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you mentioned hope, all right, the thing that came to me was knowing your purpose gives you hope. Because when you know your purpose, you've got something to do that if it's God's purpose, not your own, okay? God's purpose for your life was pre-designed before he knit you together in the womb. All right.
Yes.
He gave you gifts and things that he wanted you to use.
Yes.
So in my case, again, going from the atheist to the Christian, everything, I had spent over 30 years in the financial arena, which has nothing but worldliness in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's nothing eternal about it, because no matter how much assets you accumulate, you're going to leave them behind. I mean, you never see a hearse with a U-Haul behind it, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes, exactly.
So you're only affecting people for a short period of time. What God's purpose for me was, and he revealed to me throughout this process, was I am here to use the gift of teaching to help people discover their purpose by learning what gifts he already enabled them with. He equips us to be good at some things more than other things, which is what started the growth of the 3 steps to wholeness process.
I love that
if you'd
you
like,
said,
I could describe what that is.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that. But I want to just, before we do, hey, look, if you're just joining us, if you're just jumping into this podcast and you have never met Mr. Paul Silva, make sure you go back and watch this from the beginning. He has an incredible journey with medical issues, with life in general, with God, and all of the things that God has done and still is doing for him. It's such an incredible testimony, not only for God, but just for the human spirit and the way that God has designed us to deal with things and to be resilient and to resolve and to bounce back and to move forward and all of that. So really go back and watch the rest of this or listen to the rest of this, and you will just be absolutely inspired. I want to make a quick note that you said something. You said graduated into the best place. I love that you use the word graduated. Like this is we're going through a course, which is life. And then when we die, it's really our graduation.
Yep.
I love that that's your perspective. Is that something you got from this journey, or is that something you've always like, did that come from your dad, or was that something?
No, it's one of those things I just heard somewhere that I have a friend who does a number of funerals, and it may be from him, but I can't tell for sure with my memory where I heard it. But it is like a graduation, because we are not citizens of the world.
Right.
We're citizens of heaven.
Yes.
Right now we're here, but we will be there.
Yes.
And when you compare heaven to the world, it's a graduation. That's a big step up. You know?
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It's true.
But having that viewpoint, though, do you feel that helps you when you're currently going through some sort of health battle, right?
Mhm.
Or it's some of your past things, having that view at life itself, do you find it easier to take on some of those things? Because I know that, like you said, some people really get hung up with their heart attack or with their
stuck.
And stuck, I should say. That's a better word. Stuck. They fall into depression. They fall into many different things after their diagnosis or after their challenge. Do you feel that helps you?
The eternal perspective takes the weight off the here and now.
Yes.
Okay. So, and let me give you an example just by way of personal experience. My wife and I are on the same page spiritually, which is a blessing that I'm continually thankful for. You know? And she was with me through all of these different things. Okay. And just rock solid in her faith that we both felt, if I don't survive the next operation, so be it. It's God's will. And from my perspective of heaven being so superior to earth, that's good for me.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Right. But and she's been with me in that way that people say life and death matters as if that's the biggest example they can come up with for how important something is or how critical it is. Well, that's life and death. Well, no, not really. If you have the eternal perspective, life and death is just a transition. And we know that the place we go to is better than where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's like life and life, really.
Yes, life and eternal life.
Yeah.
With a glorified body that doesn't have all the problems as this one does.
It's a graduation to a new suit, man.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Like when you don't have to have maintenance done on all the time.
But I want to get let's go dive into your 3 steps. I really want to.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Tell us how you're helping people.
My gift, and we're going to talk about giftings, all right, is that of a teacher, which is just a different word for a researcher. Okay. Teachers teach, but what they really love to do is research. And then having done the research, they want to share that with somebody. That's why they teach. Okay. The 3 steps, I'm not that much of a creator. I'm only beginning to learn how to use language to create, but I can research and I can synthesize other people's research. And that's where the 3 steps came from. Right? The first step, and because I have this expression, I don't think I got this from anybody, but it's bad grammar. If you ain't getting it done in worship, nothing's happening.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I love that.
So the first step of the 3, okay, is becoming aware of your predisposition towards a certain worship style. Right? Now, after I found the Lord, it was a Pentecostal person who finally pushed me over the edge. So I went to a Pentecostal church, you know, which is great for a lot of things. And what I found from him is that his style was intellectual, and that's why he was able to talk to me. Other people's style might be different, but they can talk to people I can't talk to. All right, we each have our unique giftings in that. So there's a book a guy named Gary Thomas called The Sacred Pathways, where I get the first step from. And the purpose of it is to discover the fact that there's 9 different ways that you can love God. By love God, I mean worship. Okay.
Right.
So the church I attend tends to be predominated by people who are charismatic and demonstrative and very active and excited about their worship. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not my predisposition. Okay. I'm more of a contemplative. All right.
Mhm.
But it didn't bother me to be around those people. And I encourage other people to, once they become aware that there's 9 different ways, there's traditionalists, there's naturalists, I could go on for too long on just this one step.
Yeah.
But if you discover what your own disposition towards worship is, or the channel through which you can love God most effectively, all right? And the little detail on that is, this is not strictly DNA based. This is environment influenced as well.
Mhm.
The church you attend might have one style, whereas your predisposition, like in my personal example, might be different than that. But if you're aware of all of them, you can show grace to the people who are worshiping differently than you do.
Yes.
Okay? Because
Agreed.
that's okay. That's how they love God. Right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean you can't focus on what works best for you. Right? So once a person has discovered the different types, which one is theirs, then they're in a position where not only can they show grace, they can experiment with other worship styles. Okay.
Yes.
I'm not a naturalist. You know, the guy who goes out into the woods and feels close to God, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an outdoorsy kind of guy.
Right.
Okay? But I can really appreciate God's creativity in his creation by going out in the woods and saying, oh, this is wonderful. Right. It's not my main one, but it's good to develop a facility to be able to appreciate the other ones. So that's
Yeah.
step 1.
I
Okay?
love that. Yeah.
Yep. The second step is where the real meat of the course takes place. And those are called the motivational gifts. And unlike your worship style, these are DNA based. Right? The giftings that have to do with, let's call them talents, all right, the things you're naturally better at, you already have them. You've been equipped with them. It's a tool that you were given. Right? And what I've learned by studying that through a book called, I think it's God's Given Motive. I can't even remember the name of the book, and I use it all the time. You know, there's still some residual bad brain in there. So at any rate, there are people you know who are just natural servers, right?
Yeah.
They're happiest just behind the scenes doing the things that they recognize need to be done, and a lot of people are walking by. All right.
Mhm.
None of the gifts are elevated above any other gift. A server is every bit as much needed in any community. There's another one called a compassion person. All right. Now, there's a survey that you could take in this in the course, and I scored terribly lowly on this one here, close to 0. Right. My wife, her main thing is being a person of compassion. Right. So learning the different giftings or talents also opens you up to understanding and showing more grace for people who have different talents than you do. I don't have to try to become a compassion person. Right?
Right.
I do have to love my fellow man. I'm not saying you can avoid that commandment. All right.
Right.
But it's not what I'm good at. It's what
Right.
she's good at. So I can appreciate her gifting, because none of them is any better than any other one.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's all the
Yep.
hands and feet. Yeah, totally.
Now, there's a whole nother level of this. They call them motivational gifts because they make you do what you're going to do. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you line up your life path by focusing on using the tools, the gifts, the talents that you have, everything goes better, because God knows better than we do. Right.
Right.
Exactly
Oh, of
right.
course. Yeah.
The other level of it is there's generally a primary gifting and a secondary gifting. And the secondary gifting, you have it, but it's not as strong as your primary gifting.
Mhm.
And the neat thing about discovering your purpose is it becomes obvious to you. You know how many people are wandering around wondering what their purpose is?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even
Yeah.
if they found an occupation that used their skills are not the same as talents, right?
That's
They
true.
still are wondering, what does God want me to do with my life? What's his agenda instead of my agenda? Right?
Mhm.
Discovering that you have a primary and a secondary gift allows you to look into there's an interplay between them. Okay. So I'm only going to use myself as an example because I don't know your giftings yet. I would like to get to know you well enough to know
Yeah.
that, but we'll see. Being a teacher first and an exhorter second, and the thing about giftings, these motivational gifts, you may be discounting one of your gifts because environmentally your family wasn't for it, for example. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
grew up in a sarcastic intellectual environment. All right. Exhorting, encouraging other people is a better word for it. It's not so Christianese, right? To be an encourager was mocked. It was like, oh, you goody two shoes, you Pollyanna, what are you, positive, and right? And that
Yes.
was not respected. So I squelched that gift until I discovered it. Right? Now it's
Wow.
secondary to my primary gift, but to give you an example, if I were primarily an exhorter and secondarily a teacher, then I would be predisposed to being, for example, a coach. Right?
That makes sense.
Coaches are more about motivating their players to excel, and along the way, they teach them the fundamentals of the game.
Okay.
to
Great
equip them to do
example.
it, right?
Okay.
On my side of the coin, I'm more interested and gratified by teaching you, and then it's up to you what you do with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not an accountability partner as a mentor, right? I am an accountability partner for some guys, but not as a mentor. A coach is different than a mentor in that a mentor is a relationship that requires mutual respect, but when the mentor says something, it implies a responsibility, a response on the part of the mentee to take that advice and put it to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being
This
is
primarily this and secondarily that has taught me how to focus my talents into mentorship. So I mentor small fellowship groups, I mentor church things, I do all that kind of stuff, and my course. So anyhow, that's probably about as short as I can keep the middle step, the motivational steps.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, I love
when
it.
you know your giftings, life is a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I can imagine.
That's great.
And the third one is more difficult, and that's learning how to receive and operate the spiritual gifts. And
Yeah.
I know not everybody in the community, the Christian community that is, even believes that the spiritual gifts are still operable. There's a lot of people who think that, well, that's fine. That was just for the apostles. And now, it's not available anymore.
Right.
Well, I assure you it is available.
I've seen it. It's available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last part of the course is teaching them how to be open to receiving them. The difference between the DNA-based motivational gifts and the spiritual gifts is that spiritual gifts are not DNA-based. They are situationally required or encouraged, or you're given an unction to do it because it fits that. God wants to use you to operate in a spiritual gift, even if it's a gift you've never operated before.
Right.
He'll put you in that situation.
He equips
and then
you.
It's up to your submission and obedience to say, okay, I'm going to walk across the street and do something that he told me to do. Give the homeless guy my gold watch or whatever. It seems totally illogical and everything, but I'm going to do it.
Right.
That's how you strengthen your ability to operate that gift, is by being able to hear it and then acting on it immediately.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's happened to us. And it does, you just can't explain it. You just know in your guts, in your spirit, that you are aligned in that moment. You know that you were supposed to do it. Is definitely not something you do for everyone. It's definitely not something you've done before or you do often. I mean, we've had God tell us that in a very, just very weird situations, not weird like the situation was weird, but there's situations that we've heard people have before. I mean, you come across a situation like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then in this one time that makes no sense why this one time would be different, God's like, I want you to do this. And you're going, okay, well, okay, we can do that. And what's interesting to me is that, when God's saying it, and here's why. Because normally if I heard God, if I heard even the thought in my head to do some of these things, I'd be like, wait, why would we do that? But I never say that when it's God. I don't even question it. I immediately look at him and I know, and he goes, yes. And we wouldn't even have to have an argument. Like, he's like, yep. It's super weird,
Yeah.
but it's always super weird in a good way. It's like, wait a minute.
It's always been, I know
You
what
just
you're
know
saying,
you're supposed to
but
do
it's
it.
always been just this beautiful thing, because we know that number one, we're being called to be obedient.
Yeah.
But God in that moment is choosing us to be obedient, to walk out that spiritual gift. And when you said, if he calls you to walk across the street and give that homeless person your gold watch, that really hit home to me, and reminded me of there's several situations where that God has called us into those situations out of the blue, just
out of nowhere.
There was no lead up to it. There was no warning. It just happened. And I've never had a gold watch to give away, but but the thing is, sometimes I've had a little bit of extra money. I remember there's this one point where we got a little bit of extra money. It just came. It was a surprise to us, and we were like, oh, that's a blessing. That's great. And then myself, I couldn't really speak for my wife, but I was thinking of all the ways I could spend it now. I could spend it this. I could do this now. I could do that. And then we went to church. Church didn't even start. It didn't even start. And there was this lady that something had happened to her a lot in her life, and someone close to her, and that required that she needed to leave,
to fly
and to go out to one of her good friends. And she was distraught because she knew she couldn't do it.
She couldn't afford the plane ticket.
And in that moment, and my wife's talking to her, and I'm like away from her. We hadn't discussed anything. But at the same time, God told us to just give what we just got, the extra money,
give it to her. That was for her.
Give it away. I mean, we had just got that money, and we saw that was the exact amount that she needed. And we
knew it, and we were like, great. And it's like, there's so many times, the reason why this is such a beautiful thing is there's so many times in our lives that we wish we could do something and don't have it. So when God hands it to you, instead of being like, oh, I just got that money, of course, blah, 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 instead of doing that, just know I've learned my lesson now. Anytime we get anything extra, I look at him, I go, I don't know what this is for, but it's going in the bank, because I'm telling you, we're going to get something. We're going to get a sign or something. I know this is for, and it's not always for someone else, but sometimes it's for something that comes up and God's covering us. And that happens a lot too. But it's always like, okay, what is this for? So when that happened, it's like you immediately have this comforting feeling of like, oh, well, God's allowing me to be involved in being able to help someone, but having the means to do it, and not having it be just my sacrifice. God's providing for his people through obedience and listening, right? And then the best part is that after, what's another confirmation always that it's God, is they look at you and they go, how could you have known that? Right? Yeah. And it's always God speaking to his people and going, I'm here. I hear you. I'm in your conversations, and I'm connecting you, and I will equip you, and I will provide for you. And it's such a beautiful interaction when we just listen to God and do it. And then we like bond as people spiritually that way. It really builds our faith and builds our community and builds it not builds our faith, but our relationship with God is stronger, and we hear him more often. It's like a practiced thing. It's like building a muscle,
Yeah, exactly right. No, you were really, your 3 steps is that fantastic. Really speaks my language. We've been talking about this for many, many years on the Christian community altogether. I know the Christian community, we all know about the hands and feet of God, but so many times we get so locked in to what we think we know about God and our spirit, our spiritual life and things like that. We become narrow-minded, and we become that this is the picture of Christianity. This is what being a Christ-filled person is like, and you need to fit here, rather than thinking, wait a second, I thought we were supposed to be the hands and feet of God. My hand, you guys, my hand is different than my feet, right?
Yeah.
My head is different from parts of my body. My arm is different from my leg. It's different lengths, right? It has different functions. It operates in different ways. But when we think about our spiritual life, we don't think that way. And like I said, we've talked about this for many years.
We've talked about it for years.
And we need to honor and respect the hands and feet of God. And by doing that, we do that by respecting that and understanding that God has different purposes and different callings for different people. And it may look a little bit different
than you expect.
Yeah. It may be, and it's okay for that. Maybe you don't operate in that way, but they do. And that is equally a blessing and a beautiful thing in God's eyes. It's equally the same way.
Paul, so you're doing huge things for people.
Yeah.
You're doing huge things for God. You have absolutely 1000%. I know we're all human and we're all fallible, and I'm sure that you're a human being, but there's so many things that you've really done right, and just so many ways that you're helping people. And so I just want to just thank you for coming on and sharing that, because I know that there's people that will absolutely come and find you and, just get the things that God's trying to give them. I wanted to go back real quick and just make sure we get that shout out that you wanted for organ donation, because that's a huge deal. Yeah. There is really under discussed, and like we're organ donors, like on our driver's licenses or whatever. Can you just talk a little bit, just for a moment, about how people can do that and why they should do that?
Yeah. Well, why they should do it is it's a waste of human life to let one slip by just because somebody wasn't aware that they had the opportunity to become a donor, right? But for you two individually, I would say you need to take another step beyond the signing of your driver's license, depending on whatever state you're in. That's good, okay. But I know these organ coordinators, and I know how they're trained and how they behave in the medical community. If any of the next of kin, or actually the next of kin, has reservations about it, that overrides your license.
I didn't know that. That's great information
to move forward. So what you need to do once you've decided to become a donor is don't just notify the authorities, notify your family, so that if that situation arises and they're confronted by is not the right word, approached by a organ coordinator, right? They can say, yes, I know this is what his desire of his heart was. I want you to do that. Okay?
Yeah.
So tell your family, all right? The why, obviously, you can't use your organs when you're dead, okay?
Right.
But there's a living, breathing person out there who can. And it's not just your heart, your liver, or your kidneys. What I learned by doing some volunteer work for these folks was that the average donor will beneficially impact up to 17 lives.
Wow.
Okay. Because there's a lot more going on. My wife made a good friend of the guy who got his liver transplant when I did. He didn't even make it out of the hospital. This is a long time ago before they had it down. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was so inspired by it that she became a cornea harvester.
Yeah.
She was a hairdresser, and she became a cornea, to promote organ. So there's corneas. The biggest one for me was the tissues, skin tissues. Never occurred to me. I became a donor and didn't think anybody was going to be using my skin. Right.
Right.
Well, I used to ride a shuttle bus in Boston because after a transplant, you don't get to leave right away. You got to stay right close till they get the immunosuppressants balanced and so forth. But so I'm riding every day on this little shuttle bus that has more burn victims in it than anything else, because next to Mass General, there's the Shriners Burn Institute. Right?
Okay.
And I could see the suffering, all right, pain that far surpassed anything I had been exposed to. All right. And the idea that if you become an organ donor, you're going to be contributing to the alleviation of the nastiest pain I can think of, because it takes a lot of skin grafts, if the person's really involved in a fire, to get them back to where they're not in pain anymore. So that's my biggest motivation for being a skin donor, is not a skin donor, an organ donor.
Yeah.
You don't think of your epidermis, if you will, your skin as an organ, but it is.
Yeah.
It's the
But it
largest
is.
organ you got.
Oh, absolutely. I had never thought of that either. And what an amazing gift. I mean, honestly, like it really, really is, because where are they getting more of that? They're not getting it from anywhere else. You know what I mean? It would have to be donated. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just something that, again, is under discussed. I love that you said to get your family, your next of kin notified. I imagine putting it in your will, or your not your will, probably would be
that, not to contradict you, but by the time they read your will, the opportunity to become a donor is passed.
Oh, okay.
That's
would it be then your, what is that document for when you're having medical procedures?
Your
Directive?
Yeah, your directive.
Medical directive?
Yeah. Check with your state, because I know you got listeners all over. Okay?
Sure.
Each state has their own. I'm in New York State. With us, it's a driver's license. That's all it takes.
Okay.
Okay.
As long as your next of kin doesn't contravene that, fine.
Okay. No, I was just wondering if that was like maybe something else you could do. But no, that's great
good
information, because I
Since
just
you
didn't
brought
even
it
think
up, and
about
I
it.
add one little thing. It does
Yes, of
have
course.
to do with the donation aspect. Is that when you mention a health proxy, okay, if you have one, read it and see if it says "do not intubate" on it.
Okay.
Okay, or DNI they call it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with DNI orders, and they do look at those right away. That's not like you will later on. They look at, if you're near death, they're going to look at that. And if you have a DNI on there, or do not intubate, your organs are likely to go to waste, even if you're a donor. Because when death occurs, you can be intubated to keep oxygenation happening to those organs and keep them vital.
Okay. So if you have a do not intubate, then they wouldn't intubate you, and they wouldn't keep your organs.
Well, it depends on how much time goes by. And,
right.
But I mean, it's not 100% one way or the other, but it does cause the loss of donatable organs to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously that is different from a DNR. DNRs do not resuscitate, but you could still be intubated.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. So that's a very good point.
Monica's jumping in here. She says it's called an advanced directive. That's right. You can always fill one out at any hospital that you are involved in with your doctors, or before you go into any procedure. Yep, absolutely. Yep. And the thing is that I just want to make sure we went over this before we ended, because this is a big part of your story and what your outreach. But I don't think people just know enough about this. So I did want to make sure we went over it, like you said. And so I really appreciate your information. I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you before we run. So I'm going to go ahead and put up right here. If you want to get a hold of Paul and his 3 Steps to Wholeness program, make sure you contact him at paul@3stepstowholeness.com and just give him an inquiry about, how do you get into his program? He is switching gears on his websites and things right now. So the best way to get a hold of him would be to do this. He definitely has a blog you could check out. Obviously, check him out at Paul Silva on, Facebook and LinkedIn and things like that. You'll definitely be able to get a hold of him there. Anything else you would like to leave our audience with? Maybe what's the number one thing you would tell someone when they're going through all these things you would leave them with today?
Trust God.
Yep.
It's a lot harder to do than it is to say.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot in that statement.
Yes.
And it's absolutely the truth. Yep. Thank you so much for being on with us today, Paul. You're such a joy and a blessing to have around. And you definitely will get to know us more and get to know our gifts, because I think I would definitely want to talk to you more about that, because I just think it's great what you're doing. So
yes, absolutely.
Well, listen, Thank
Well,
you
it's been
again.
fun. I really like how you guys operate. You're just, you know, I could tell you're my kind of people.
Well, God's
All right.
definitely bringing his people together lately. So I appreciate you saying that. Well, listen, we're going to let you go, and we're
Okay.
going to have you go backstage, but we want to make sure that everybody knows how to get a hold of you. So we'll put the links below this episode. And so if you want to get a hold of Paul, make sure you hit him up there. Okay. Thanks
Okay.
again, Paul. Have
All
a
right, Paul.
great
Yeah.
rest of your day.
Have a great one.
Bye. All right. So that was way more than I even expected, because I know we talked to Paul before, and we kind of knew his story, but he didn't, of course, go through his steps. Those blew my mind. That's right on point. It goes even deeper than I would have even thought.
Right.
I'm just so fascinated.
And it really goes even deeper. I love hearing someone's perspective that is in alignment with us, but goes deeper and brings up things that in a way that I never really thought of.
Right. Different perspective.
Right. And so that's why we do this show, to bring other people's perspective. It's not just about you and I, right?
Right. Yeah, of course.
We want to bring in other people's perspective, because there's, what, if you might be someone that you don't relate to me, and I don't take any offense to that, but you light up when you hear Paul. He said something today that just got you thinking, and God has really been speaking to you about something. And maybe Paul said something today that just confirmed that. And that's the whole idea of this Saturday show, that there's something that is said that ignites that underdog within you, that ignites that thing that keeps you pushing, it keeps you moving forward, that actually awakens something in you, even in the midst of your storm. So I hope that you guys got something out of today. I really do. So if you do, please hit like and share this. Be sure, again, we're broadcasting now live on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our new channel, and that you can get notified when we do go live again and when we post more things.
Absolutely. And listen, if you want to make sure that you are subscribing to our podcast too, make sure you jump over to heartofanunderdog.com, where you can listen to our audio podcast on the go, anywhere you want. You can share those. You can subscribe to that. Make sure that you're hitting us up there. And again, if you want to sponsor our show, if you want to be one of our platinum sponsors, and get a shout out maybe for what your outreach is, if you have a business or something, we do have platinum sponsorships where we will give you shout outs on our show live, so that make sure that people know where to find you, and we will be doing that regularly for you. So make sure you're jumping over to javiandjessicamadrigal.com to partner with us there. And look, if you want to go deeper with us, if you want to get to know us better, if you want to see the work that we're doing, if you want to get healthy and you want to really tackle your lifelong health, you can jump into our free group on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/adapt and overcome your health. And that's where you're going to find just a ton of information and a community of people fighting the things that their battles with, an overcoming spirit. These are the underdogs, right? So we thank you for joining us today. Have an absolute wonderful day and be blessed.
Have a great weekend. Bye.